Hey there, folks. Welcome to another exciting episode of CIS 2555. This is Professor John Ball again, and this week on 216, we are learning about developing multi-page web applications. That's what we will focus on primarily. I've also included Chapter 5. I will leave the reading of Chapter 5 up to you. It's a relatively short chapter. I did upload the slides, but we will not be going through them in this video lecture, so I'm leaving that as an exercise to you. They're fairly straightforward and it involves breakpoints and things like that, so it would be very useful for you to debug your application properly. Programming Assignment 1 will be assigned this week. I've already uploaded it to Assessments Dropbox. If you go to Assessments Dropbox, you'll note that there's a project number 1 listed there. Under there, I have a slightly different interface than you guys do, but you guys will be able to see this CIS 2555 Proj 1 attached, and when you open it, you'll be able to take a gander at the project. It's fairly straightforward for the most part. The exercises are from the book's website essentially, with slight modification, so that's why they may look a little bit like the stuff from the book. Do note that they will make mention of things like exercises extra folder and all this other stuff. You don't necessarily need to worry about that. Just make a website with this stuff done in it. So you do exercise or extra 2-1, which is building the quotation application. Then you format the quotation application that you started on the last one. So even though it says, hey, open this exercise 3 quotation, you could just call the website quotation or whatever you prefer, really, and then just continue with all 3 of these. I think there's three exercises. So don't worry about the mentions of the exercises extra and all that other stuff. So then you do 4.1, which is enhancing the quotation program or a web application, and then after you're done with all this, you just zip up the whole thing and turn it in. So that's all you need to do. Just at the top level directory of your website, you just turn in, and I will be able to grade it that way. Okay, so you'll note on the website there is this ex04 cart zip file, and there's also 2 sets of slides. I will only be going over Chapter 4. That's got the most meat in it, really, for what we're going over. And we'll go through an example using ex04. But I do recommend highly that you go through Chapter 5 slides and go through Chapter 5 on your own as well. So, okay, let me see here. All right. Okay, so developing multi-page web applications. So we'll go through some of this and get an idea of where we're heading, and then actually develop the application itself. Okay, so this is the order page of the web application we're going to build. You'll notice that there is a list of product names, and there's also an image over here, and then product name and description right here, and then also a price. All of this information must be pulled from a database. So even though we haven't gotten into the database discussion deeply yet, you will be using an SQL data source. So you'll use an SQL server database. It's a .mdf file, and you'll be using an SQL data source control, which we will normally just call a data source. And then we will get the information from that. So with this drop-down list, you'll be able to click different items on the list. It'll display a unique image for that item, and also a unique description and the prices for that item. Make note that if you're not familiar with database concepts, I believe a prereq to this course currently is the Visual Basic course, but if you've had C#, that's going to be the new prerequisite for the course as well. But if you've had it, you're had essentially the same information, just in a different language. So the information you're pulling from the database is loaded into memory, and an in-memory copy of the database or portions of the database is called a data source. So remember, we have stuff that exists on a hard drive or on an external drive of some sort of secondary storage device. All of that stuff is in the quote-unquote database, but we typically call the in-memory copy of these things the data source. So, and of course this comes up every time. Keep the current columns. Don't show the message. Okay, yeah, hasn't caused any problems yet. It just gets irritated because it sucks a lot of memory using Camtasia apparently. So, even though it seems to perform well. There's actually a bug in Camtasia I found out. I need to update it and see if I can get it to work properly, but it hasn't affected it yet, and I've gone through the lectures just to make sure it's not damaged or anything, so it seems fine. Anyway, when you select items on the order page and click Add to Cart, it will take you to the cart. So you can go to the cart, and then if you click Continue Shopping, it should take you back to the order page. And if you hit Checkout, it'll allow you to check out, remove item, empty cart, etc. Those things will, empty cart will clear the entire cart. Remove item will remove individual selected items if you have one selected. If you don't have one selected, there should be an error. And at this point, for this chapter, the checkout button will not work properly because we won't have implemented that functionality just yet. It'll just put a message at the bottom. So we can load this in the Visual Studio, the website, so let's do that. You have to unzip the zip file that you download from Desire to Learn. So once you download this and put it in a location you're satisfied with, make sure you extract it. Let me show you what it looks like as soon as you extract it. So as soon as you extract it, it'll look something like this. It'll say EX04 card, then you double click, it'll say the same thing underneath. So it usually gives you two layers of the same name. Usually what I just do is I cut this inner layer and then paste to the outside. It says, do you want to replace it? And you say yes, and then you have the single layer yourself. So if I go under Visual Studio, I'll go to File, Open. Make sure you select Website, not Product or Project Solution. If I select Website, I will look in the appropriate directory. Yours might be on your flash drive or it might be on a home computer. And I look at EX04 Cart. That is the name of this application. And I click OK. So you wait on that for a couple minutes to load. You'll notice that it's currently, you can see the C:/ in the front. That means it's using the ASP development server and not IIS. We want to make sure that it's switched to IIS. So I'm going to right click and go to Use IIS Express. So you click that, click Yes, and then click OK. And then you'll notice it no longer says C:/ in front, it just says the name of the project. So that means it's using IIS Express. So we'll get back to that in just a little bit. But you'll notice these are the items that it shows you under the Solution Explorer. You've got the stuff in the app code, stuff in app data. Your database goes in the app data. The MDF file is the database that you're using that your SQL is going to access here. A lot of that's done automatically, but you can do your own custom SQL commands as well. So the styles folder contains different styles that are applied to different pages, and then you've got images for each of the products, and then a banner image, which is going to be at the top of the web application, basically this Halloween Superstore image right here. So this goes through and it tells you the different files that are associated with the shopping cart application and what they do. So I'll let you peruse that. Notice there are actually two files that we're dealing with as far as code. There's four essentially, but you've got cart.aspx, that's the ASPX file with the server controls and such, and then you've got the code behind file for that file, and then you've got order. So basically it's two pages. You've got the cart, you've got the order page right here, and then the cart right here, the shopping cart. Okay, so one second. Okay, so there's a menu for changing the start page. So the first thing that'll happen is that when you open the application and you try to run it, there will be no start page set. So it'll actually show you just a bunch of empty, or not an empty directory, it'll just say, basically give you an error and say there's no start page set. So all you do is you right click the file and then say set as start page. So normally it looks for a default.aspx file. That's the default name. There is no default.aspx file here. So that means you can change it if you want, which they did here, obviously. So you've got cart and order available. Now, since there is no default.aspx, it doesn't know which file to use. So you're going to have to right-click order, for example, and then say set as start page, which we'll do a little later when we actually go through the example. So, to create a new class, you would right-click on the app code folder and then select class under Visual C#, and you can code the class. They've actually coded them ahead of time, and we'll talk about the classes in just a second, but you can do it all manually and make your own, do whatever you wish. Other things that you can do is to redirect or transfer to another page. There are primarily 3 techniques that they talk about in the book. You can use the transfer method of the HTTP server utility class. That's one way. So ASP.NET will immediately terminate the execution of the current page, and then it loads and executes the page specified in the URL of this method right here. However, the drawback is that when the new page is loaded, the browser has no way of knowing that the application returned a different page, because it terminated the current one and just loaded the new one. So as a result, the URL for the original page will still be displayed in the address box. So that's a drawback. Number 2, you've got the redirect, and then number 3, you've got redirect permanent. Redirect method of HTTP response is works a little bit differently. It sends, when you execute this method, it will send a message from the browser, or it'll send a message called an HTTP redirect message back to the browser from the server. That message causes the browser to send a new HTTP request to the server to request the new page. So then the server will process it, and although this requires an extra round trip, the user friendliness of the method usually outweighs the small performance gain that you get by using transfer. So transfer is more efficient, but the user friendliness of the redirect is much better, and it'll also change the address at the top. Then you've got redirect permanent, which is typically used when a page is physically moved or renamed within a website. So here's code that would transfer control to another page as an example. Code that redirects the client to another page, and then permanent redirect. So they show you different examples here. Here's properties of different items. You've got the Postback URL for the button. That is, one moment. Sorry. I want to make sure you have a page for this. It's on nope, that's not the right page. There we go. Page 131 in the book, if you have the book on ASP.NET 4.5 Web Programming with C# 2012 by Mirak. The Postback URL they describe on this page as specifying the URL of the page that should be requested when the user clicks the button. So when the user clicks that button, the HTTP post message that contains that URL that is set in the Postback URL. It's sent back to the server, and then when the page with the URL is loaded and executed instead of the page that was originally displayed. So that's what the postback does. It causes the server to send the new page specified by the postback URL. Property of the page class used with cross-page posting. This is called previous page. And then you've got a method of the page class used with cross-page posting. So basically, to use what they call cross-page posting, in general, you just specify the URL of another page in the postback URL of the button control. So when you click this button, it'll go to it'll send a message to the server. The server will return a different page. So there's the ASPX code that's generated for a button. You'll notice that the postback URL can be modified either in design view or in code view. And the tilde is only used with server controls, but it says basically in the root directory you have the cart.aspx, so this will not work. The tilde will not work if it's relative files and it doesn't involve server controls. So you have to be careful with that. Now, the find control is another, here's a way to get data from another page. So as long as the previous page is not null, then you can look in here and call the find control and then ask for it by name. So we might have a text box on the previous page that before calling the current page, txt quantity was, say, a text field. Find control will find that and then return it as a general object, but you have to cast it to text box. That's why we put these parentheses out in front, because otherwise it doesn't know what kind it is. So you have to explicitly cast it to a text box so it can be used. Then you can make use of it in whatever way you want. So in this example, they set the label quantity text equal to txt quantity text. Here's code that sets a property in the previous page. This is another way to obtain data here. You've got a custom property. They're calling them custom properties in the book. So you've got the property quantity text, and then they have a get there. So there's no set. That means that this is read only. It just returns the txt quantity.text. You don't really have to append it with this. They do that just to avoid naming resolution issues. But you would define this in a particular page that's supposed to provide the data, and then later on, if you need to get this data, you just say previous page dot quantity text. So any custom public properties that you have available, you can access them through the previous page. And then they go through different ways to use absolute and relative URLs here. So you've got an absolute URLs up here that starts at the HTTP level or HTTPS level. Then these use relative URLs that are based on the current directory. So in the current directory, if I look for checkout.aspx, it would have to be at the same level as the current page that has this code in it. Likewise, if I'm in a page and then there's a subdirectory called login, and then you say login/register.aspx, the register page is inside the login directory, which is inside the same directory as whatever page is calling response.redirect. Statements that use relative URLs that navigate up the directory structure involve these examples. So this would start at the root level. This goes up one level. That's what ... means, if you've ever seen that before. ... means go to a directory above the file containing this entire statement. So let's say it's in default.asp or order.aspx, and that's somewhere in a folder. If you go one folder above and then look at register, that's the folder above me. If I want to go two folders above me, two directories, you go ... If you don't put anything except for a slash at the front, that will mean it'll look from the root directory as well. Server control attributes that use URLs based on the root directory of the current website. You've got Postback URL and image URL. Since both of these are based in the server controls, you can say Postback URL equals tilde/cart. That's the root directory of the current website. And then image URL, since we have images, for example, I've got images right here, and then the banner, I would say it's in current directory or root directory /images. That's this directory /banner. So that's how they got that. Now, next we're going to add we're going to learn about adding data sources. So to create an SQL data source, it basically just creates a connection to a local database. So you first have to create the database and then add it to the app data folder. So that's in Visual Studio. You can see the app data folder, and it has a halloween.mdf file in it. So when you create the data source, you basically can drag the SQL data source control onto the form, which we will do a little bit later. and then you can do that in either design or source view. Then you select Configure Data Source from the Smart Tag menu. The Smart Tag menu will look like a little triangle. And then once you do that and go to Configure Data Source, this is the Configure Data Source dialog right here. You select from the drop down what database you're dealing with, and then keep clicking Next and rename the connection string if you need to, and all kinds of stuff there. So once you've done that, you can select what items from the table or view. This is allowing you to do kind of an easy way to do it. You can do restrictions and ordering using the where and order by buttons over here, or you can specify a custom SQL statement by selecting the top radio button. So you've got all kinds of options. We're going to mostly just use the simple ones for now, and then worry about other stuff later. Okay, so when you choose a data source to bind to a particular item, so for example, I had a drop-down list on the page or on the form, you can click the Smart Tag and go to Choose Data Source and select the data source, and then also select the data field to display and the data field for the value. Now the difference between these two is that the display will be what the user sees in the drop-down list, for example. Then if someone selects it, if the data is passed to another method or something like that, then the drop-down list product ID will be the drop-down list data field value property. So these are slightly different. This one's what the user sees, and then this is what the actual data field is. So you've got data text field, which is this top one. That's what the user sees, and then the data value field is right here. So you can put different data in these two different items, properties. Okay, so session state is the next thing that you should pay at least a little bit of attention to. You know what? We probably need to go back. I think I skipped something accidentally. The select method of the SQL data source class, you've got this, and you've got properties of the data source class. We'll see these in action a little bit later. It's a little more difficult to describe here, but we know that given select options, will return an IEnumerable object. Now if you pass it the option, which is on page 141, if you pass it the option data source select arguments.empty, when you call select on a data source, it will return all the rows. So basically all the rows in that particular data source or table specifically. Then you can set the row filter to retrieve the particular row you're looking for. So if you were looking for a particular product ID or looking for a particular item, then you would use the row filter. This is called an indexer. You can actually treat an object like an index. So they do that in various options. They have like they obtain the row, and then what they do on page 141 is that they go through and they pass as an index to retrieve the row. They put a 0 because they're assuming that only one row is going to be returned since it's unique. And then for these down here, they're going to retrieve what they're saying retrieve columns. Essentially it's going to retrieve the item or the value at a particular column. So it's going to give you a cell value. So you would say row and then brackets, and then double quotes, you put something like product ID or name or one of the other fields that exist in the database, and then that returns the actual string or data that comes from there. So they show you this code right here. So you've got row, and then the indexer, they put the double quotes here, and then you have to say .toString because this just returns a column value basically. So now state of a session, we learned in previous chapters, pretty much from the beginning, that HTTP is a stateless protocol, so it does not maintain state between different loads of a page. So the way around this with ASP is that ASP uses what's called a session state to keep track of the user session. So that can keep track of all kinds of different data, such as information about the user's name, whether the user's registered or not, can keep track of objects the user is working with. For example, in our shopping cart application, it's going to keep track of that information. It can also keep track of pending operations. So, many times maybe you've gone to fill out a form and then you navigate away, or there's an error, or something cuts out on the internet, and then you go back and all of the stuff you filled in, the 50 different fields you filled in, were empty when you got back. That's because the sessions, HTTP is sessionless or stateless, and there was no session data loaded. So sometimes it's very useful to maintain session state. So then they give you common properties. Won't go through those just yet, but just know that you can use the keyword session here. It's not keyword, but it's a variable named session, and then you put @cart using indexer. That's basically a session level variable you're setting, and then you set it to the cart. Okay, so this will hold the entire cart, which is a cart list. Another way to add it is session.add. You put the name, comma, whatever object you're adding. To retrieve the data, you call session @cart. That's the same way basically that you added it, but you have to cast it to whatever object type that you need the data from the session. So this one happens to be a sorted list, so you would cast it to a sorted list. To remove an item from the session state, you just say session.remove, and then pass it the name of the item that you're removing. Okay. So the common properties, there are different classes you're going to be dealing with in this shopping cart application that we're going to be developing. The first thing is the product class. Often this is used basically just to transfer data between different items, to maintain data. That's really its biggest and only major purpose. So basically it's just a bunch of public properties. So all these properties are available publicly, and they basically just maintain data about an individual product. So that's their purpose. So sometimes you would call this type of object a data transfer object, because that's really its purpose. It basically just stores and transfers data. That's all you use it for. Then you'll have a cart item class, okay, and then we'll have a cart item list. So you've got product class, cart item class has a constructor, two different constructors, has product and quantity, so the product that it represents and how many of that product. So that's why product itself does not maintain how many. It's just to describe one individual product. The cart item would be a specific item in the cart. So once we have them displayed in the cart, then you can change the quantity that way. Cart item list is essentially, for all intents and purposes, the cart item list is your shopping cart. So this list right here will maintain a list and the count and various other options of the cart items that you have in the list, and you allow it to do things like return the cart itself. That would be a static member that we'll see in action a little bit later. So that's all that fun stuff. So right here is the code for the product class. They go through here. You'll notice that these are all auto-implemented, so there's no additional information. They just have get set, get set, get set. So they maintain their own backing fields. They're all public. So there's your data transfer object, or at least the class that they will be created from. The cart item itself, they have basically an empty constructor here, and then there's a constructor that takes a product and the quantity. For convenience sake, notice there is the product property right here that returns a product, and then you've got quantity. You also have add quantity and display. This right here will display information in a particular format and then return the display string. This one will format the item's name, quantity, and price. It'll be what basically is listed in the list, your actual shopping cart, basically. So the cart list, the cart item list. So here's your cart item list. You need link for this. So that's for the lambda expression, the first or default, for this first or default, this basically is taking either the default item, which is null if you don't have anything selected or it's not in the cart. Otherwise, it will return the item where the product ID matches. So this is kind of just a convenience way to do that. If the syntax is confusing, don't worry about it. Just use it verbatim for now and look up the first or default method, or first or default method, and what are called lambda expressions. So it's not too bad. And then they go through and they show you what they've changed from previous implementations of this. Right? The connection string was added automatically when we connected to the data source. Label set to run at server on this one. And on-click is button add. Postback URL for the cart. So if they click a button cart, it'll go to the cart. And it does not try validation at that point. So it's not going to cause a validation to get fired. Then they go through all the code here, but we'll see that when we actually do the actual implementation, which we'll get to in just a moment. See if there's any other information I'm forgetting. They go through the CSS. We're not going to spend too much time on that because this isn't a CSS class. Okay. So, and ultimately, you're going to. This is another example that you can go through if you want a little bit more practice.